everyone. This is another Higher Things video short. The Deaconesses. That's the subject of today's Higher Things video short. It's hard to figure out in the early church what the deaconesses were. Paul references Phoebe in Romans 16. Diakonos, masculine form. Phoebe, definitely a girl. And so it's as if he was speaking of something that we should know about. As if we should know who the deaconesses are. Not very difficult to pin down what they were doing in the early church. Were they the widows, tending to other widows? Were they like the altar guild and the LWML ladies doing their thing of service? When women were set aside for this vocation in the early church, one thing was universal. They weren't ordained. This was not the women's answer to being a pastor. You know, we couldn't be pastors, and so we were deaconesses. Well, that's just clowning around and not cool at all. You see, the Lord does service. I come amongst you as one who serves, he says. And that he would have a particular works of service for women that only they could do is totally and completely gospel-y Jesus. You see, God sends servants, deaconesses, to do the tasks that men can't do. To be places where it would be inappropriate for men to be. And that's where the deaconesses shine. Widows, orphans. Women who are hurting in abuse situations. Divorce. Counseling. There's not a pastor that I know who wouldn't love a solid deaconess to be in those situations with them. Or all by themselves. Serving. That the deaconesses would be sort of despised in the world and cherished in the church is the way of, well, Jesus. How could God be on Good Friday so lowly, beaten, crowned with thorns, standing there, mocked? The world says this is a lesser office, but James says that tending to widows and orphans is true religion. And so the Swiss Army knife of service in the church, the deaconess, given to do the task that only they can do. Widows, orphans, the elderly, single women, music, children, youth. They do all those things that the Lord would have them do. They're consecrated to that task of service. Do you have to get a degree to be a deaconess? Well, in our church, you do have to get certification. But any woman who does works of service in her congregation is, well, a little deaconess. Whether in the altar guild or tending to the widows or visiting the shut-ins, doing that task the Lord would have her do. The Lord loves his deaconesses, with those with a capital D and those with a lowercase d. Widows, orphans, service, love, care. That's that's consecrated for that service. That's the deaconess. Hard to pin down in the early church, but we know what they do because we can hear it in their name, servant. I'm Pastor George Borghardt, and this has been another Higher Things video short.